Because I'm known for my terrible
strong.
mumbling and my small voice, but I'll send you telepathic messages, so you'll just get this in your mind.
This is not very well done because these seats, they're kind of low, right? You look very dominant.
No,
and I don't see you, so.
It's a humbling experience, I think.
Yeah, let's stand here, because if not.
Oh, we can stand. I'm easy with standing and walking around. No.
There.
Yes. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you all and to this event, which I'm looking very much forward to, because I've watched him since he was 6 years old, in a really roundabout way. When I saw El Topo, when his first film appearance, and he's been a recurrent theme in his father's pictures, and played his grandfather in a wonderful picture which we didn't see yesterday, but I'm looking forward to seeing that the beginning of next week. And so, I mean, I think Brontis has had an amazing journey. I mean, he's brought up in a very creative environment. We had a small talk just before coming in here when he was talking about he's born in Mexico. It's not like Wikipedia says that he's born in Chile, and his father was doing some unbelievable theater work. I mean, very avant-garde theater work, which Brontis has also been doing. So I think we have a lot to discuss about both the films. Of course, the father-grandfather relationship that sort of reverberates through all this work. And so, Brontis, I'm very pleased to meet you, finally, and in the flesh, basically, because I've been seeing you in so many guises through the years.
Well,
so
I'm very glad to be here too. And, so where do we start? From where do we start? We have to start. Who was there yesterday night? Okay, so where do we continue from?
So we have a starting point, but also what I would like to ask you, I mean, is because your father has very deep esoteric interests that come through all his work and films, and he is very much concerned with stuff. In a way, the psychomagic things of healing the past and going through things. I mean, do you share these interests with your father, or are you like some people who say, okay, Dad is way off, and I'm going to forge my own career and my own interests?
So you can agree and be interested in the same things and forge your own thought.
Yes.
There's not things that are separate. But I always have like I like to say that I had the word psychology, or the word subconscious was in my milk bottle, you know. That was the word. He was always my father has always been interested in that kind of things. So we grew up with my brothers, like this kind of knowledge that we have our consciousness and the subconscious, and there's pulsions. And so on one side, it's very good because it gives you an idea that life is not only just a rational, tangible thing, but on the other side, when you're 10 years old and your parents tell you that subconsciously you want to kill your brother. Okay. No, they didn't say this, they exaggerate. But yeah, but I think it's a process of time and society. When I was a child, going to a psychiatrist, to a psychoanalysis, was a shameful thing, right? So people would go there, but they wouldn't say it. Like if your parents were divorced, the first day of school, and you have kind of say what's your family situation. You say my parents divorced. It's like like to shame. So now with the children who have actually, their parents are still married and still together, they kind of feel weird now because now all the parents are divorced. So, and now you have, in any newspaper shop, you have reviews of Psychology magazine, right? We have this in France, Psychology magazine. And psychology is everywhere, it's in commercials, it's everywhere. And thanks to Woody Allen, the shrink has become like a very nice friend we would all like to have. Huh? It's like part of the must-haves. Huh? My psychologist. So it's, maybe my father was just like many artists of those times, and maybe that's what artists, that's their quality. They're sometimes a little bit ahead. They can, you know, of the general movement.
Yeah. No, so, but your father never struck me as being a Freudian. I think he was always a bit more
come
into
closer,
Jung.
because I have to turn back.
I think your father was a bit more into Jung and those things.
Oh, yes. Yes,
because
yes,
I don't think, I mean, even, I mean, we were talking about Leonora Carrington, probably the only surrealist to be fired from the surrealist movement because she did not believe in Freud. I mean, all the rest of the surrealists had
well, the surrealist movement, I don't know if many of you know what that is. It's a long time ago. They liked very much to fire people.
Yes, yes.
They were surrealists, but they were very structured. Yeah. They were like, you know, you can be part and you cannot be part. André Breton was the Pope there and, you know, excommunicating some people.
Yeah, she was fired for being vulvocentric as opposed to phallocentric. So I'm putting some big concepts out to you.
Hello. Yes. So, like I was saying yesterday, for those who weren't here, sorry, I repeat. For my father, every movie he has done, it was always a process for himself. Whether to open his mind or to question himself, but already since the beginning, I think he was interested in not in the arts like an aesthetic thing, but as a useful thing. First against society and then against to open himself, and then formulating, like saying that art should be for a healing process. And if you follow his cinematography, it's more or less that. Fin d'Ulysse is the first movie he made, based on a play of Arrabal, but there's not much left of Arrabal's. Was very like criticizing the society, the conventions and all that. No, it was his first movie he made in Mexico. We must know that Mexico in end of the 50s, the beginning of the 60s, was a very rigid Catholic Latin American society. And it was before the 60s, the 68 and all that arrived later in Mexico. So they were not used to that kind of cinema. And for any movie you wanted to make, you have to ask an authorization and show the script to the union, not even to the political guys, but to the unions. You know, and my father was always kind of sort of rebel, and so I said, "Why I'm not going to ask authorization to the union if I can shoot this or that. So let's go." And they were always shooting, hiding from the union guys. You know? So they had to shoot very quick. And there was always like in hiding, not saying where. So when he issued the movie, there was some sort of scandal, probably because of what the movie was, even if I think it's the only movie I can't really watch with my father. I find it very boring. But there was an attempt to go against society, conventions, and all this. That was shocking for the Mexicans. But what really get them pissed is because he didn't pass through the union. And obviously the union is they had to pay, you know, the thing of the unions of those times. Maybe today they're still the same. Have to. Movies always, it's a question of money all the time. But I remember when he was shooting The Holy Mountain. I don't know if some of you have seen The Holy Mountain. He made recently some DVDs came out He remastered everything, the movie, and it's very beautiful. So you can find it in DVD. And there's one shot when there's this sort of is it a beggar? Yeah, beggar that sees that there's a tower, and on top of there's gold that comes from this tower, and the people of the market, they put food in the basket, they take the gold, and the food goes up there. So this beggar, this little crook, he sees this, and so he throws the food away. He grabs the basket, and he goes up, and that's where he finds this master, this alchemist, and he becomes his disciple. But this was shot in a location in Mexico City called Las Torres Satélite. There was some sort of architectural decoration for the highway. And he went to shoot there without permission. And they had to shoot, if you actually see the scene, which is kind of quite long, they had to shoot everything in 2 hours. And because a helicopter starting to arrive of the police, and it was like, the police is arriving, let's go. So the shootings of the movies in those days were always very, it was always an adventure. But this is to say that an artist who really wants to make a statement and have an action on society, most of the time is rejected, pushed away, because there's the survival reflex of the society. We all have our basic, most of the things that we live in our lives are in a way connected with this super basic instinct we have, which is the survival instinct. Sometimes we're afraid of falling in love because we feel we're going to lose the control of our life, so we feel in danger, right? But this is the survival instinct that is functioning there. So to go forward in art like this, there's always a part of risk. And there's always a moment when you have to go to the unknown, to the unusual, to find an expression that will be really authentic. Maybe, if not, you're academic. When he was shooting, it's okay, I tell you some trivia, okay? This is because we're not going to make too much theories and talk too much. He was shooting the Holy Mountain, and one day he was invited. He was already kind of known because he would do many theater plays, and he was some sort of figure of the underground and like, making scandal things. And he was invited to meet the Ministry of Culture, Secretary of Culture. How do you call Minister of Culture?
Yeah.
Mr. Jodorowsky of Mexico, and the government. How are you? We're so happy you're making this big movie. It was after El Topo, so he had some money he got from the United States. That John Lennon gave him some money and to do. He had a lot of means not to do a lot of things. It's a movie full of fantasy. We're so happy you're doing this. It's so good for the image of Mexico and blah, 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 blah. Are you happy? Yes. Well, I invited you. I wanted you to know that there's no censorship in Mexico. There's free expression for everyone. But, well, we recommend that in your movie, you show nothing religious and you show no military uniforms. And you do what like you want. But, well, some people might not be very happy with that. And because, well, I've heard that you are insulting the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is the Virgin of Guadalupe is the Virgin of Mexico, right? And that is not very nice. Even we are non-religious. Officially, Mexico is not non-religious. Right? It's laïc. I don't know how you say laïc here. But and if I says, I'm not insulting the Virgin at all. I made up, there's a scene where there's people making a procession, and there's sheep in the cross. Instead of the Jesus statue, it's sheep without the skin. Sheep like from the butchery place, like local, like where you make kebabs, right? Because in the book, Christ is the lamb, right?
And the good shepherd.
Yes. Huh? No, but the lamb is also a symbol of Christ. So instead, I wanted to make something like not the Statue of Christ. I put the lamp, the symbol. This is Catholic religion. So I said, yes, okay, I understand. But well, you do what you want. But well, I recommend it. Okay, goodbye. So my father said, well, I'm going to do whatever I want. And yeah, but 2 weeks later, we were living in a house with 3 floors. That was my father's office for the movie. My room was in the basement, and I heard during the night someone shout at my window, Jodorowsky, te vamos a matar. Jodorowsky, we're going to kill you. I was 11 years old, 9 years old. So it was very serious, in fact, right? So I went to see my parents, like, I just heard this through the window. And then we went to live to New York immediately, because it was just around the end of the shooting, and all the post-production was made in New York. So it was risky times to do a different kind of cinema. But that's also what, you know, happens when you confront yourself to the general mainstream idea of things. I don't know why I'm telling you this just so that you have fun. Have some little stories, right?
No, I think you put that because I thought the tower was absolutely amazing in the film, and it had great production value. So I mean, knowing that police and helicopters were coming after your father, make it even more special for me.
When we were so for the most recent movies, the movie you did not see, which is Dance of Reality, like I said yesterday, you can see it on VOD. I don't know what €5 is in your. But I think it's not very expensive. It's cheaper than going to the cinema. It's too bad to see it on a TV, but since you can't see it in the big screen, I recommend you see it there. You will see that this story happens in the little town where he was born. It's Tocopilla. And it was a very interesting experience because I go back to the healing process and all that. Because he was born in this city, this little town. And we shot there. And we shot a story of his childhood, where I play his father, and there was a young boy that you saw in Endless Poetry. When he's an adolescent, the same actor, but he was 3 years younger, so he was, in Endless Poetry, he was high like this, and the other one was high like this. So, but we shot in the actual place where he lived, in the actual street, and we reconstructed in the actual place, the shop and the house of his parents that had burned like 5 years before. But it was the actual place, so we can rebuild it there. So psychologically, for him, it was like going back somewhere. It was very strong, and trying to, in his inner personal process, because that's what I was saying, every movie is a personal process. He was trying to heal the image he had of his father and that he had transmitted to his sons and of his mother. So that was very intense. But in that movie, we were very lucky because all the town was really like completely open and received us so wonderfully. We blocked like for a month and a half the center of the city because that little house, after that they made the center, the mayor's place, you know, the political place of the city, the city hall, right? So it was really the center, and we would come there every morning at 8:30, at 7 o'clock in the morning, block all the streets, and shoot all day and leave at 6, which was a problem for the people who were living there because they had to make a big tour with their cars. But they were very, very gentle. Everybody accepted very well. They all were extras in the movies for free. And it was a great spirit. And I think that in a way, that was also part of what healed him, like made him good, and made that his cinema went more like he wanted to an emotional phase. You have Fanduelis, El Topo, Holy Mountain, are very mental movies. It's a mental process, opening the mind and the alchemy and symbols. It's sort of, you know. But then Dance of Reality and Endless Poetry are more emotional. And between the two of them, you have Santa Sangre, which is really a movie where it's the only movie where he doesn't appear. of what he says it's part of his cinema, if you take away Tusk and The Rainbow Thief. He doesn't appear in this movie. There's some of the figures you can find. The Terrible Father that you can find in El Topo, you can find in Santa Sangre in Dance of Reality and Endless Poetry. But he was illustrating what he was discovering about the process of how to get out of the trap of your genealogical tree of what you inherit from your parents. Mm-hmm. So in a way, he was metaphorically trying already to get into that theme that then he applied to himself doing the dance of reality. In my father, when I was a child, he always told me terrible stories about my grandfather. I never knew my grandfather. And he told me that he would take him, his father wanted him to be strong. A man, big balls, and brave. You don't cry, and no illusions. God doesn't exist. You die and you rot. Afterwards, there's nothing. He told that to my father, who was like 5 years old. So that was very, very strong. That gave him a fear of death that was probably also the fuel of his desire, of creative desire, also, because things are good and things are bad in the same time. But it was a big trauma. And he was never, see what I did to you, he was never touched by his father and was always violent. He would take him to the dentist and tell him, well, I'm going to ask the dentist to make the treatment with no anesthesia because you must dominate pain. Ooh, no anesthesia, okay. And that really happened. Then he put it in the movie. But I know it's true because he told me that when he was a kid. And there's his novel, Dance of Reality, where there's all his life is autobiography. You can read it. Dance of Reality is the first chapter of the book, and then this poetry must be chapter 2 and 3. You see that, and he didn't have the idea of making a movie there, but he tells all what his father did to him. And also tells how his mother was a very frustrated woman who had this dream when she was young to be an opera singer. And her parents, when she told that, just gave him hit her with a stick and told her she would be a housewife. So that's why in this poetry, but you see it even more in Dance of Reality, she sings. Because since, like I said yesterday, memory is a fiction. Whatever memory we have, it's a point of view. It's not reality. We think that our souvenirs are the reality. They're not. They're points of view of the moment when you lived and of the circumstances. Like I said yesterday, your father, when you're 5 years old, is like a gigantic ogre from whom you like to have some protection and not be afraid, maybe. But when you're 18, it's just a little guy, who drinks too much beer. And you just say, no, you get rid of him. It depends on what is going to strike you and stay in your mind. So since it's fiction and since my father is a cinematographer, he uses cinema to tell the stories, and cinema is a projection, right? And like I said this yesterday, I like to say this. Like in our dreams, since we're talking about Jung and all this, in our dreams, everything you dream, this is the theory, is an aspect of yourself. So this unicorn that is just in your garden, that is not your garden, but you kind of know this is your garden, but it's not, but you open the door, and there's a unicorn in your garden. Wow. And then you wake up, but the unicorn, it's you. The garden, it's you. The door, it's you. All this you have to process and see what aspects of yourself they are. So since it's a projection, right, you have the light that projects the images, but it's also the projection of yourself there. So everything in a movie, especially in these kinds of movies, I don't know if in X-Men, what is the projection of the subconscious of the director of X-Men. I'm not sure about that. But in art movies, like my father's, everything that is on the screen is a projection of himself, of what he has received of reality and wants to project. So he can, I jumped from one thing to another because I know where I want to go. The shortest way to go from one point to another is not the straight line, it's the most beautiful way. Sometimes you make a long trip, but it's such a beautiful view, and you make the trip, it seems shorter than like taking a tunnel under the mountain, right? He was interested for a long time, we were interested for a long time in the dreams, because he was, Jung again, works a lot, wrote a lot about dreams and all this. If you read a book of Jung, My Life, he talks a lot about how his discovery of himself was through analyzing his own dreams. So for us, we found this kind of studies and worked on that about how to be conscious in your own dreams, how to be aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. But sometimes this can happen, then we wake up, right? The illusion goes away. But there are some techniques, very practical things to do that you do every day, and then suddenly you can be conscious, aware that you're dreaming in your dream. You have this experience? Okay, see, it's like this. You have a colleague there. And so this is kind of the same process, right? So, and once you're awake in your dream, then you can do some things in your dreams. Like the first thing you would obviously do is try to fly, right? So you push yourself and suddenly you fly, right? And when you fly, it's more like, for me, it was like big leaps, big jumps. So you go up, and when you start going down, so I wake up. But then with some exercises, you manage to realize that you're dreaming, so don't be afraid. Because there's one very important information that I give you, is that in your dream, you cannot dream that you die. That's probably because our consciousness cannot conceive its own disappearance. But when you have this,
we're actually into Nightmare on Elm Street territory there as well. But I'm pretty sure that.
Wait, let me finish. Yes. Let me finish my story. That's like that with me. Short question, very long answers. If you have this information in your mind, most of the nightmares calm down. And if you get to be aware that you're dreaming, when the monster starts running behind you and you get panic and you want to run away, I'm talking to you about a personal experience, not about theory. I have done this. Then you realize you're dreaming, and you just turn around and you run towards the monster, and the monster vanishes because you cannot dream that he devours you. It's impossible. And then you pass to a very nice dream. And most of all, you wake up in the morning and you feel like Superman. Really, it's a great, great, great feeling. I'm finished. So, since you have consciousness that you're dreaming, you can also have the consciousness that what you apprehend as reality is a form of dream. It's a form of illusion, because we're all having a point of view. You know the story of this, the first time an elephant arrives into the blind society. It's a country where everybody's blind. There's never been an elephant there. So an elephant arrives, and the academy has to tell everyone what's the elephant. You know this story, right? It's very known. So there's one of the guys starts touching the leg, and the other one starts touching the nose, the other one starts touching the ear. And one scientist says, an elephant is a very strong, grounded pillar. No, dear colleague, you're completely wrong. An elephant is a very mobile, humid, and that makes some very strange noises. Wow, you're crazy, colleagues. An elephant, it's a big surface that moves with the wind. But they are all right. But they got the ear. Because they all have their point of view, even if they're blind. So, if you have a point of view, you can change your point of view. I was speaking with, where are you? A colleague from, well, he's a philosophy teacher from time to time. And he told me, yeah, one day I was with my students, and the first class of philosophy, I came into the class, and they were all the students sitting, like we all did, in the same place, right? The ones that like to sit over there, the ones in front, So the first thing I did, I took my chair, I went to the other side of the room, and everybody had to turn around, so the ones that were behind were in the front. And then we did the studies of philosophy, and after 1 year, I asked them, what do you have, what's staying for you about philosophy? I said, oh, the day we changed the chairs, and he went to the other side. Aristotle, Platon, they didn't remember nothing, because it was a very practical book. He changed their point of view. So if you can do this, and you apprehend reality as a form of illusion, so you can work on that. That's what he's tried to do with these two movies, if based on the reality of the facts, not changing the facts, which is not lying to yourself, but trying to see it from another perspective. My father comes from a Jewish family where his father was completely atheist, saying God does not exist, you die, you rot, afterwards there's nothing. But still, we all have this myth, even if we don't believe. Our society, our mentality is structured by our myth. This is a Judeo-Christian myth for most of us, like the Buddhists or for the Greeks, all these gods and all that. And the practice of the normal practice of the Jewish, there's no dogma like in Catholic Church, to saying woman is bad and she's a sinner and all is her fault, which is completely false. If you read the text, that's not what's written. The Jews have this tradition of being commenting all the time. That's why you have the Torah and you have the Talmud, which is a book with all the commentaries of the great wise rabbis. So it's always about interpreting. So in his process of this, in his own personal mythology, because we all have our personal novel with our heroes and ogres, which is, our grandfather is the ogre, our mother is the princess, that we have to say from our father dragon, for example. You can work on that story. That's what he does in his movie, in his own myth of my terrible father. So, do we have to live with an ugly myth? Do we have us here to live with the interpretation of the Genesis that says that woman is evil, that woman did wrong, that she listened to the devil, that is a snake, and that she must, in a way, pay and all her life carry a bag? Why women all carry a bag? That's a mystery. It's very practical, but socially, you can also interpret it like they're always carrying their guilt, right? And what do men do generally? You know, to pocket oh, can I have this in your bag? Carry it for me. I do that with my, I just realized. Damn. But I'm sorry for this kind of digressions, but that's just so that we share some ideas. Can I make a little digression to this myth thing? It's okay for you? You tell me. If you're bored, you say, hey, I'm bored. Okay. I can make a little dance if you want. Yes, you read the Genesis. It's a very interesting book because we all have this. We think we know all these stories. We don't know them. I was very shocked in my childhood when I knew the Cain and Abel story. And when I went to read it when I was an adult, it's a tiny little chapter. You have the Bible and it's Cain and Abel. It's a little tiny thing. Well, yeah, I mean, so you read the Genesis, and if you really read it, I encourage you because we must know, even if we're atheists, we must know the myth. Because our subconscious, we're atheists and free-minded about religion. We now conceive we have the choice of believing or not. And we respect the believers and the non-believers. But that's quite recent, right? This has maybe not even a century yet, completely. And in some countries, it's going back to you don't have that right. So we must know what structures the architecture. Muslim countries have a different architecture than ours. And the polytheists, like the Greeks, they have different architecture. Our architecture is, you see the cross everywhere, it's angles. So, when you read it, you really read it. I try to make it fast. The creation, the first chapters, he creates, right? And he separates light from darkness. In the beginning, they're mixed. It's very difficult to conceive light and darkness together. You know this story, right? This fairy tale. And but let's go fast. And how does the woman appear? I know it very well in French, so I'm sorry if my English is not very... il fait peser une torpeur sur la terre. He makes the earth sleepy, let's say. Okay? You'll find the best translation. He makes the earth sleepy. That's what it says. And then a steam, a fog or something like this rises from the earth. Like, you know, in the mornings, when sometimes you can see this. How do you call this when... you know, in the morning, you're this field and you have some...
Mist.
Yeah, mist. Thank you very much. A mist rises from the earth, right? But if you really read the thing, just like I'm like a child and I have no preconceived ideas at all. It's just... So I see that man, that is mixed, male and female, he's made of what? He's made of earth. He's made of clay. It's earth. Him and earth is the same thing. And he falls asleep. Man, and male and female. Like the earth. Right? And then this mist comes up, and he wakes up, and there's the woman. In Hebrew, in classic Hebrew of the Torah, you don't have the vocals. You only have the consonants. So that's why it's always interpreting, because depending on what vocals you decide to put between the consonants, words get a different meaning. So in French, we say that elle était à ses côtés. She was besides him. But à ses côtés, it's the same root, the same word means rib. But you must be very fucking stupid to think that the woman is a rib of the man. Really. This is the religious guys that want to... religion is always about submitting women, most of the time. But she appears on his side, right? Because it's the same process of separating the waters, right? The sky from the seas, light from darkness. So all the process is like separating things one from another so that they find their own essence. And the creation of the woman is the last thing that is done in the it's almost the last thing in the creation process. So she's there. Oh, there. Huh? I don't know why I want this side. Because I'm right-handed. She could be on this side. And then, just before retiring, because God retires to rest, right? That's what. If it's God, does he need to rest? It's really. This is for children. You know, he goes away to rest, like in just 7 days. What is 7 days for God, who is more than time, who is more than eternity? You know, but that's part of the plan. That's part of the game. The last thing he does, says, "Well, I'm going to go have a nap. You're cool now. I finished here my job. Oh, by the way, there's 2 trees there. In the garden, it's full of trees, but there's 2 trees there. So this tree is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that tree there, just aside, is a tree of eternal life. You know this, no? We all know this, even if we don't. We all know this. So me as a kid, I say, He says, be careful, don't eat of that tree because you're going to become mortal, the knowledge of good and evil. Huh? So that means, I'm quite logic, that they are not mortals at that moment. Right? Do you agree with me? You follow me? Okay. But don't eat that one there. Look, that tree there, this one there. Okay. Well, I see he really points it, you know. He pulls their attention to that, to there. I think, and why does he, well, you know that the last thing that happens in creation is not the appearance of woman, the separation between male and female. All this is symbols, huh? It's not really women and men. It's symbolic, it's a symbolic language. The last thing that happens is that man has to acquire free will. That's how you say. Huh? That's how we say, no? Yeah, okay. But there's only one way to acquire that, and there's only one way, I just think, the only way to prove your freedom. There's only one way to prove your freedom. And I think, but maybe that's where I am in my thought, the only way is to disobey. How do you prove, no? What do you do when you're adolescents and your parents say, hey, don't smoke, don't drink? Yeah. No? Because you're proving that it's your own decision. It's your life. So I can go and destroy it because it's mine. Even your parents say, yeah, it's my drama with my daughter. You know? It's like, yeah. Okay. But he points where and how to disobey. He gives an order. He says, don't do that. But he puts just aside, he puts the tree of eternal life. Because he knows he hopes maybe, he knows they're going to do it, because if God is submitted to time, then it's not God. I don't believe in God, okay? But I just try to take the story, the fairy tale, to see where is it useful for me. So if he's submitted to time, he's not God. So he knows what's going to happen, obviously. So he puts the antidote there immediately. What happens? He just retires. He says, don't smoke cigarettes, but you do like you want, and he goes away. And then the snake, that someone made the snake, that has legs in that moment, which is the symbol of the libido, the instinct, the intuition, like in the Jung aspect of things, like from the Middle Age, it's that. It's not an evil character. It's written nowhere. It's written that it's an evil character. Nowhere. So people who tell you that sex is bad, now you know it's not true. So he speaks to the woman. Why does he speak to the woman? Because she's the last thing created. She's like, she's made of mist, so she's pure essence. And she goes, she listens, and she goes and she eats of the tree itself and the fruit of the tree. So I really know nothing about men and women at that moment. I know absolutely nothing. There's nothing written tells me that woman is stupid or evil. It's written nowhere until then. So a woman goes there. So if I read the story, what happens? What happens? She gets the you're distracted. She gets the knowledge of good and evil. Right? Because that's what happens when you eat that tree. And what does she do? She gets man and eat of that tree. And there's only one reason that could possible for that. It's because it's good. Because she knows that is good, that is the good thing. There's no reason. If she realizes she eats the tree, she has a knowledge of good and evil, and she knows it's bad, why should she go and ask the guy to do it? She knows it's bad, so she says, hey, God, I fucked up. And then she gets out of paradise, and she's alone, and man stays cool, and it's no problem. But no, since I don't have a preconceived idea of women, she goes, that means it's good, and they do what they have to do, and they acquire the knowledge. And it's said in the text that their eyes open, which means that before they were with the eyes closed. Then they see each other, and they see themselves that they are naked, which doesn't mean it's horrible. Oh. It's just they see themselves, it's symbolic. They see themselves at the beginning, the essential what they are. They see themselves with no disguise, with no preconception of themselves. Right? And then God comes back, and he says to them, the first question he ever asks, because before he says, this is this, you will do that, but the first time God asks a question to them, to him, both, says, where are you? So if it's God, don't tell me that he doesn't know where they are. So this points a very interesting question. Where are you? And he says, here I am. So he acknowledges himself. He's capable of seeing himself where he is. Okay. I don't want to go too far. I like very much this story. But it's a way just to watch it. I'm not even giving an interpretation. I'm just kind of trying to read it as it is. And God doesn't say, you bitch, you did wrong. Because people say, she's punished because she's going to give birth and it's going to hurt. Yeah, well, if you go to the doctor and he has to make an injection to you, he tells you, well, this is going to hurt a little bit. Think, oh, okay. But he told you, so you know, so you can manage the pain, right? But if he makes an injection and you're like, distracted, you know, it really, really, really hurts. So I'm totally free. It's my absolute right to think that he was warning the woman, saying, now you're mortals. You cannot stay here. But I found a solution. You're going to have babies. Like this humanity will go on. But, well, it hurts because it has to pass here, and it's between 3 and 5 kilos, and the head and your vagina is, you know, so it's going to hurt. I talk to a man because so that he knows what it is. And so the woman knows. She knows. She knows. And now nowadays we know that women prepare to give birth, to make yoga, breathing. Even the fathers breathe with them, you know, make the non-pain exercises, the men. I was giving, my second daughter was coming, and I was with her mother like this, and I made very serious of these exercises. I was with her like, you know, she, one moment she said, stop breathing in my face. Get away. Well, it was a very moving moment, but I felt really silly. But I'm free to give this interpretation. And he said nowhere that woman did wrong. Because she didn't do that. You read the text. It's the Garden of Garden of Eden. And that means, but then they go out, and everything is spines. All the rest of creation, it's it's terrible. So and it's cold, so he gives them, he protects them, no? He clothes. And you have to go. And you cannot come back to this garden. Because I put 2 angels there. Because why would men and women want to come back? Because there's the antidote there. The eternal life tree there. So obviously they want to go back there because death and go back to the garden. We said, no, there's 2 angels and you go out. No? And the snake is going to push you. So your intuition, your libido, your anima, like if you know the Jung thing, your anima is going to push you forward to your destiny, to what you have to accomplish. So, yeah, well, this is a punishment. Damn it, no? But why does God make a garden and puts the eternal life tree there? Because he knows we have to try to go back against death, no? And then you start to think, well, so if I can't, he makes a problem. There's the garden, the rest, and 2 angels that you cannot fight again, and you get to get there. So I can interpret that the only way to reach that place is, since we are made like the example of God, right? That he made us as with his image, in resemblance, right? God makes a garden. So maybe the only way to get back to the Garden of Eden is to make of the rest of the creation a paradise, so that there's no difference. So maybe our mission, or what we have to do to get back to eternal life, or to defeat, is that there's no more this frontier. Since, as an example of God, he made a garden, so I'm going to make of the rest the garden. There we struggle. And the rest of the history of Genesis is story of couples, not of a man and a woman like paying for her fault. You see Abraham and Sarah, you see Isaac and Rebecca, or whatever. This is not at all about cinema, and I'm sorry. It says I like this story. But it's just to say you can interpret things. So, to get back, with his own myth, his own story. This is my choice. Why do I prefer this version than the one of the church or this whatever pedophile guy that has the authority? Because it's the interpretation that is better for me. I find it more beautiful, more useful. I don't want to think that half of humanity is a sinner that has to pay for whatever stupid story. This is not the way I want to see life. So, our own personal myth, how do we work with it? We have monsters, we have interpretations of our story, saying that your father was a monster and you don't deserve to be loved because a child that is not caressed and is not loved, he immediately thinks that he doesn't deserve it. And so your self-esteem is attacked. So what he did with his movies, this kind of process, he gives an interpretation of his myth, his family story. And based on the facts, he reads it in a different way. He shows his father another aspect of him. In the Dance of Reality, we'll see that it's the main character in Dance of Reality is the father, and a whole process that drives him to open his heart, because he's beaten so hard by everything that happens that at the end he breaks and he opens. And like in this poetry, which was for my father when he was young, it was a very hard time. He describes it like a period of suffering, and all his memories are in black and white. That's why the movie starts with black and white photos. No? When he goes the process back to his memory, the first thing you see is black and white photos of like the neighborhood was before. And then color arrives because he colorizes his souvenir. He gives a poetic point of view of them. His drunk friend and all these bohemian guys that were in reality weren't really artists. They were just drunk people. He makes something out of them because it's more useful for him to carry inside of him a father whose heart finally opened. It's better for him to have a mother that talks singing because he realizes the desire of his mother in real life through cinema, through reinterpreting his story, through the remake of his own personal fiction. So that's the process that he proposes to the audience. As you can see in both movies, I think more in Dance of Reality than in this one, but still in this one too, because you have these people in black that bring the objects or that push the photo of the locomotive. He always saying this is a movie. He does the contrary of what generally a director would want. A filmmaker would want you to identify to the character so that you live the process through the character, right? No? A lot of movies are about a process of change or finding yourself or getting the treasure, which is always symbolism of something. But it's always through the character. So even if here you have some appeal with the character, because we all have lived this, like I want to be something and my parents want to be something else, or if our parents are cool, society wants me to be something else than what I am or what I want to be. We can identify with this character, but he always shows this is a movie, and the movie maker intervenes, he appears, and he talks to the character. Why? Because he wants us to identify not with the character, but with the process. So that when we get out of the movie theater, we like the movie, the aesthetic, and all that, but I know this because when people have told me this with the two movies, you go out thinking about your own family, about your own parents, and the image you have of your father and your grandfather, or, and what can I do about it? So he's saying, you see, we can make this process of reinterpreting our own story and making it something that's richer for us, that will not be a source of resentment, because my father had a resentment for his father until he was 85 years old. And he has written books about healing and psychomagic and tarot, and he has helped a lot of people to solve their everyday life problems, interior problems. And he was still there. Talk to me about my grandfather. That bastard. He was 85 years old. I told him one day, I said, how can you still, being who you are, still being angry with your dad? This is so the childish pain. Because resentment is resent to re-feel the non-love, the fact of not being seen, not being accepted, not being desired, right? So he changes this in the movie to heal himself. He says, I did this movie to heal my soul. You see, all the Bible thing had something to do with the theme.
Yes. Well, I think you. I think you just answered my first question, whether you were spiritual as your father.
At last.
So of course, yes. I think it goes without saying. Yes. No, I think this is open to so many interpretations. Like the story of the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life and the Tree of Knowledge. And basically, in Genesis, it actually says that God, or the sons of God say, man is about to come one of us.
Yes.
Yes, because
great point. No. In the Hebrew, in the Torah, I make it short. In the Torah, he says, man has become the one of us, which means you can read it differently. He has become one of us, which means God is not one. God, it's a remembrance of God is male and female, and God is not a guy with a white beard. Well, you could be. You could be. We could have an image of God in some paintings. This is God. Imagine him naked like this. It's God. No. But it's also because the letters in ancient Hebrew, they're also numbers.
Yes.
That's why there's the Kabbalah and all this is a number study of all that. And so it's also the number one of us can be like millions and millions and millions.
Yes, and also, the name of God in Genesis is Elohim, which is a female word with a masculine plural ending. So it's Gidirnir in Icelandic. It's actually the goddess with the plural masculine ending. So that gives you a clue.
Tits.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. Ratsonia.
Very nice, huh? Nice story, you see. So some trivia to have fun.
So maybe we could have some questions at this point.
There's a microphone for you.
The stuff on myth and engaging with myth, like in some ways, I think it might be easier to reinvent or to, particularly as a woman, like the whole history of religion is problematic. And the whole Genesis myth is problematic. So in some ways, I feel it's almost more interesting to try and look to alternative or create your own myths, because so much of what you've spoken about tonight, like I come from a Catholic country, Ireland, but I feel we're still living out these paradigms, but I don't necessarily find it particularly useful to, like, you can reinterpret, or you can do other things as well, which is reject them and try and find, there are, alternative, hidden, silenced histories in who we are, and I find it useful to try and find those, or find people who are trying to write about those, and women who've written about those who've been forgotten. The first person who ever wrote something down, apparently, was a woman, actually. But I suppose I'm just asking you, fascinated that you're so interested in reinterpreting it sort of for the positive for the female, but I think that also it's important to think about just rejecting it.
So, there's this story, there's a guy who's 150 years old. So this journalist says, wow, how do you manage to be 150 years old? What's your secret? Well, I never contradict anybody. No, that's impossible. Yes, that's impossible. I was using this example for 2 reasons. First, because the myth of our inner story as a family story is just to see that you can treat it as a mythological story with heroes and ghosts and all this, right? And to make a parallel with mainstream myth. I'm not saying that I'm a believer, or absolutely I think that you can reject and try to find other things. There's some people that, some Norwegian guys that go to Amazonian and get into another myth completely even, that is not absolutely not linked with them. Cool, no problem. But I do think that, according to what I know, and I might be wrong, most of the myths of humanity have similar structures, similar basic structures with different names or different type of adventures. But it's very interesting to see how there's some basic structures in ourselves. So obviously you can reject completely the myth. In that case, I wouldn't be able to do that because I think that a human being is not only rational and that the mythology is a symbolic language that addresses to our subconscious. But you can write your own myth, absolutely. No? Try to make your own story. But probably you will fall in the same type of structures. Yes. And it's okay. That's no problem. No? And I was also making the link with the Torah and all this because my father comes from a Jewish family. His parents were Jewish, and my grandfather did exactly what you're proposing. My grandfather rejected completely. Why? Because it's a family that was running away from Eastern Europe, my grandparents' parents, from both sides. They were running away from the pogroms where they were saying Jews, they drink the blood of non-Jews. And they were getting killed for that. So they ran away. They ran away to Paris with the little money they had, because there were people who had little stores, little things. In Paris, there's a guy who said, a Russian guy, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to get you, give me your money. And then the guy disappeared. They were very naive, and they were completely poor in the street. They went to a homeless Jewish association in Paris. They told him, here, we've got 2 tickets for Buenos Aires, and for the other family, 2 tickets for Santiago. And they went there, and they became agricultural slaves. So my father is necessarily linked with that. But they were rebuilding a Jewish community there. And when my grandfather grew up, it was like the beginning of the communist ideology and all that. He became communist, and my grandfather didn't want to be identified as a Jew, because being Jewish is, one day someone says you're drinking the blood of the kids and kills you, I think. I think that was his reflex. And also as an immigrant, he wanted to completely blend in society. So he became member of the Communist Party because everybody was in there, and then he took part. He was part of the firemen of the city, and he took part in the board of direction of the school. And he said to my father, God does not exist. He did exactly this. God does not exist. No religion. No myth. Reality is this. And there's nothing else. You die, you rot, and that's it. Well, but it was his choice, right? But strangely, even if my father was always an atheist, and he hates religions, he was strangely always attracted to the myths. He was interested in Buddhism. He was interested in paganism and Catholicism, Jewish mythology. He knows a lot about the Sufism and all that. But that's what was useful for him. You see? I'm not saying that everybody has to do the same thing, which is unhuman.
I was just wondering, because of your Irish background, and you did this play called Dancing at Lugnasa, which is actually, in a way...
Why do you talk about this play?
Yeah, because I saw it on your resume that you...
Oh, okay. I was saying, wow.
Yeah. No, I'm cosmic.
What a coincidence.
I'm really cosmic.
Yeah.
But that in a way...
Yes, great. You know this play? Brian Friel?
Yes.
Great play.
And which is wonderful. I mean, you have this old priest that comes from sort of Africa, having gone native and is probably become the farming pagan, and then you have all the pagan beliefs of the farmers around. So it's a wonderful sort of fight between the Catholic sort of Irish institution, which is basically killing these 3 sisters, I mean, who will probably not have a husband and are doomed to be spinsters and stuff like that. And
there's any actresses here? Read that play. Great parts for women. You? You?
Yeah, it's a brilliant play. Yes.
You know this play? It's great. It's a great also for women. Great parts for women, which is rare in theater, because he talks about the old guy but the husband, but the parts for women are.
Which part did you play?
Jerry Evans,
Of course,
obviously,
of course.
the great loser, but charming. All the sisters were in love with him. I played this a long time ago. I was younger. Here it comes.
I would like to ask about film,
About?
the process of filmmaking.
Yes.
I was curious. I mean, the films I saw, they were very imaginative and vivid and colorful. And I wanted to ask, what was the energy on the set? How prepared the director was, or how much was happening on the spot? What sort of role intuition played in some decision making together on the set and in the montage.
In the montage,
yeah,
in the
just a little bit about
post-production, you mean?
Yeah.
After the shooting,
editing,
you mean?
but also mostly maybe about the set, because that's where.
Okay, so there's. I'm going to try to be precise and not go too much. So you have, my father makes a script, right? But for some movie makers, especially in France, I've seen this, instead of making movies, they illustrate a script. It's right. But his conception of movies is not that. I have a script, very written, structured, that you have to have because it's the basis to find locations, see the costumes you're going to have, how many characters, find the actors. If you don't have the script, so you have to be prepared. And there's, for both movies, there were 2 months of preparation, which is quite short for a movie, but it's also because they're very low budget movies. Really, it's like Dance of Reality is $4 million, and Endless Poetry, that looks richer, is in fact not completely 3, a little bit less than 3, which is low budget movies for what they are. So everything is prepared, costumes, so, but then the shooting of the movie, it's a new writing. You see, he compares the movie like a body, so the script would be the skeleton. It's not the movie, it's just a skeleton. Because you have to have a structure, something that, And then you will have the muscles, all the organs that will come during the shooting. So how is a shooting day with my father? Everybody's there. He arrives when everybody's there. Like everybody's there. Technicians prepare before. We know what's set. We have to make a program for the shooting, obviously. Where we're going to shoot, put the lights, and all that, the makeup, actors are costume. Everybody's ready, or practically ready. But we don't know where it's no preparation about where the camera is going to be and all that. So he arrives, and he says, everybody stop moving. He doesn't say hello to anyone, because he wants to give the feeling, and on the first day of shooting, he says, I'm trying to make something, we're going to try to make art, and this is a healing process for me, and cinema is sacred. The creative process has to have some sacred aspect. So please, no jokes. Like in every shooting set, there's always people like making jokes, or the actor thinks he gets relaxed. No jokes, please. As silent as possible and focused. He's 87. He shot that he was 86 years old, the second one. 83, the first one, and 86, the second one. So he's an old man. So he's had to deal with his energy, and directing a movie is a very physical activity, because you come, you go, you're standing all the time, you're not sitting there, it's like you have to solve 100 problems a day, especially in a low-budget movie. So he manages to keep his energy very focused, he asked everybody to be focused, and we would always finish the shooting like an hour and a half before schedule, which in Santiago was great because people would go home and all that. But when we were in Tocopilla for the first movie, all the crew lost a lot of money because since we finished early, everybody went to the hotel. There was nothing to do in this little town, so they would always do like these huge barbecues every day, and they would party every day because they had the time to recover for the next day. So all their per diem, yeah, disappeared there. They were ruined afterwards, poor guys, but they had fun. So please be silent, and I want to work with the actors, right? He knows the scene. He wrote it, and it's not only he wrote it, it's his memories. And then he goes with the actors, so okay, yeah, you go this, you do that, you say this. So he puts the thing on the moment because he works a lot with his intuition. And he was, for a very long time, a theater director, right? And once he has structured, he has found how he wants to structure the scene, then he does that, and the photographer watches, and then he says to the photographer, okay, so I want this, you shoot it like this, and then the photographer says, okay, but we can also put a second camera here, have that. Well, great, okay. Then everybody goes away, the photographer prepares the light. When it's ready, as quick as possible, because he doesn't want the day to be too long. Okay, let's go. We shoot the scene 2 or 3 takes, no more. Because he thinks that, he thinks actors, after 3 takes, they become mechanical. But he works with non-actors. I think in the movie, I'm practically the only real actor. With my brother, but my brother, he's in this poetry. My brother is mostly a musician. He has done some things, and he worked with my father younger in Santa Sangre. But the only guy whose profession is being an actor is me. And I really don't agree with him. I think an actor becomes mechanical. If he's trying to be a good actor, he will every time try to go further. But he doesn't like, because he knows very well what he wants. He structures it very well. But that is like a basis for la spontaneité, the spontaneous to happen. He loves accidents, right? And after 2, 3 takes, okay, I've got it. Now, but Alejandro, can I redo it? No. Okay. Because he believes a lot in post-production, which is the third writing of the movie, where he can change things of place and choose the moments. And he knows that if he has the moment of this actor when he's concentrated doing this with his hands like you are, right? He has it. So he knows that he just got to concentrate here, he goes back here, and the story will be told. You see? That's how he works, which is a very simple craft. When you're making a movie, you have 100 people there working every day. It's an artisanat. It's like an artisan. It's like making a chair. When you're making a chair, as inspired as you, you use a hammer, glue, cut wood. It's a craft. It's a craft. So you're not into whatever delirium or psychological questionings or whatever. You know, it's very practical craft. Did I answer your question? And then in the post-production, he loves the new techniques. He loves digital. Says, some people are nostalgic of celluloid films. He says it's wonderful because you can change the color of a curtain, pass it from blue to red. So he goes on working with the material, the image once it's done, like a painter. You see? So he enhances the colors, takes them away. He reframes some things. So he loves that. He loves the post-production. It's a completely creative process. And then when there is some dubbing, he likes sometimes to change the voices. You can see very well in El Topo, one of the female characters has the voice of a man. And El Topo itself has 2 voices, has 2 actors, because he changes. There's 2 parts in the movie, and it's not the same actor in the beginning and in the second part of the movie that dubs. You see, even the soundtrack, it's the music. His mother would take him every weekend. She would like to go to the ballroom. She loved dancing, and there was this music, the boleros and the tangos and all this. And my grandfather, he hated dancing, obviously. So my father had to go like to chaperone his mother. And he would sit there every week, every Sunday, like, for hours, seeing her mother dance with guys, but for the pleasure of dancing, and listening to all this music. So he got very sensitive to music. And so he always finds a counterpoint. Music is part also of the creation of the emotion. But that's in every movie, and you know this very well. Like, I always say for an actor, for example, on stage, you're responsible of your acting. There's the collective work, there's the rehearsal, but the moment you're acting, when the audience is there, you're responsible of your work, of what the audience is going to receive. In cinema, not at all. Your performance as an actor on screen is a collective work completely. I'm totally dependent on him, that he's a film music composer, right? So if he does the appropriate music, you can say, what a great actor, he gave me such an emotion, But it also depends if the light is red, like here, or if we're filmed from down or from up. And it depends also the sequence that is before and the sequence that is after this emotional moment that touches you so much. So for an actor, it's a collective work. Cinema is completely technical. It's completely technical, but you can put it in the service of something that is completely, it's like the dry serving the humid. I can't say it, but my English is limited, so. Okay.
I was wondering if you could talk about your training as Paul for the movie Dune. I know it was very intense. Your training for as good. Paul during Dune.
Oh, okay.
It was it sounded very intense during the documentary, and I was wondering how that kind of.
It's such a short thing that he's talking about a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune. A very good documentary. The director of that documentary is really great because he made it very, very fun. In the 70s, my father had the project of adapting Frank Herbert's novel, Dune, a science fiction novel. And I think he was one of the first years before Star Wars to think that we could make a big budget movie with science fiction. And he gathered great artists like Moebius, Chris Foss, Giger, that afterwards, this same team were the teams who made The Alien, for example, but years after. And this project was a very expensive project for those days. It was a French production, but they needed the American distribution to get the money back, because if not, the European market was too small. And they went with the storyboard. I tell this because not everybody knows. They go with the storyboard of the movie in which all the costumes were ready. It was a real storyboard. I read that storyboard. You could see the movie with the shots, the frame. This time, it's not like I said. This time, everything was super planned. The angles, the light, everything was there. It's like IKEA thing to make your, it says you just have to, and it's done, right? So he goes, this naive French producer, but he couldn't do different things. He goes to all the American studios. They watch the project. They say, wow, this is really great. But for Jodorowsky, no. Because he had made The Holy Mountain, and they had this idea that he was a psychedelic guy, So, but what did they do? Every one of them kept one of the blues. It's very well explained in the documentary. And then you see elements of this. But then Star Wars came, where there's scenes taken from this storyboard. The Alien came. They took the crew, the team. They just put my father aside, and they did The Alien. And even Prometheus, it's very well shown in the movie, have things that come from that. Well, but that's life. Cinema, as I said yesterday, is made by crooks. It's full of crooks. Really.
I think he was talking about your 2 year.
Yeah, I know. But yes. Since not everybody has seen the movie, I had to tell the story a little bit. And I was supposed to play the main character. Paul Atreides. There was some sort of messiah, but a warrior. It was like Luke Skywalker, but much better. And he was really like, he was a warrior. And my father had so much knowledge about Asian movies, and so there was action and swords. Before it was already there. And so I had to train for that. because it was a huge movie, and well, I was a cute little boy. I was 12 years old, but he wasn't going to put the movie on the shoulders my shoulders just because I was his son. He told me if you want to do this part, you know, you're really going to have to train very, 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 very strong. So I did for two, 3 years with my martial arts teacher. Yeah. So it was terrible. He taught me how to kill someone in very fun, different ways. But I took it like a game, because in those days, before he was famous, when this terrible moment when we moved to New York, which was New York before, it's not New York, now New York is nice, now it's cool. But, in those days, New York was kind of violent and dangerous, so we couldn't really go out in the streets with my brother and all that. But every weekend, my father would take us 1 week out of 2. 1 week, we would go to an art cinema, and we would see 1 or 2 musicals from the 30s, 40s. So all the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and Gene Kelly and all that, Wizard of Oz, all that. And 1 or 2 weeks, we would go to Chinatown to watch a karate movie, a Chinese kung fu movie. But the old ones, not the wonderful ones we see now, the ones who were produced by the Chow brothers. I don't know if you know about that. They were so great, you know. And they took the eyes out. They were very gore, you know. They put the hand and take your. But it was very beautiful, because it was the moment of kung fu movies with. They didn't have all these digital techniques, and the actors, as today, they were super trained. They were acrobats. It was because it was like going to see a dancing movie again. So obviously, when I was 12, I was not trained. Really, I'd say I was taught to kill someone, but it's just to make some sort of a joke. But because my teacher told me before we started, said, if ever you get into a fight, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. From now on, it's forbidden to you to fight with anyone. So he was driving me somewhere else. And we worked and trained to get a very good technique. It was hard. I worked for hours every day. So that all these martial arts would be very aesthetically very beautiful to see, very cinematic, and had to be beautiful. When you're 12 years old, you know, you have the grace. You work and you have the grace, and you're flexible, and you can jump and be precise. That taught me the precision, in fact. And as a theater actor, people who appreciate my work, they say that one of my main qualities is that I'm very precise as an actor. I think I got it from there. But afterwards, when I became an actor, I decided to become an actor years later, because in those days I was you know, I had to get rid of that, because I used to stand on stage like this. Yes, you got her. No. So one day, director, I went to a big company. The director I admired a lot, and the first play I did with them was a Greek tragedy, and I was a young actor starting there, and everybody was trying all the parts. In Greek tragedy, you have the chorus, and it was Iphigenia in Aulis, and the chorus is the chorus of young girls. So I had to do the young girl, and there my karate thing was really a problem. So I really worked a lot. The dance, again, we were doing Indian style dance to kind of get rid of that and be as feminine as possible, if ever that means something. As graceful as possible, let's say. Let's see. But it was very useful. When the movie collapsed, the project collapsed, I don't remember being sad. I remember like feeling sorry for my father, because it was 5 years of his life, and if he had made that movie, we can think that it would have been a bad movie, like David Lynch's. Maybe it would have been a bad movie. But it's like, you know, the absent father or the absent mother is always idealized, right? So the project that we didn't make, obviously would have been wonderful, and it was being an opening for the world, and his career would have been different. But as you see in the movie, he said, we do it, don't do it, we don't do it. It's okay. Everything is for the best. And what I really gained from that was something that's still useful for me, even now when we're speaking, because it got into me, into my body. It taught me the discipline, but the discipline not to be constrained, but the discipline to expand my possibilities of my body and metaphorically of my mind. I like structure when I work, for example. Sometimes I'm quite psycho-rigid. That caused me a lot of problems in my life. I was separated from the mother of my child because she was a very messy person and I was psycho-rigid. And we met very, very young. We fell in love very strong, right? And then when we grew up, we were 18 years together. We weren't finished, so that happens, no? You met, you're not finished, and then once you're finished, doesn't fit anymore. But as far as I'm concerned, I said, gee, I was so psycho-rigid. I really wanted life to be like this and things to be like that. Then you learn. So that's maybe some remains of that discipline of those days. Some personal trivia. Yes. Yes, sir.
There's a reoccurring use of symbols in your father's work.
Yes.
A few of them very prominent that we could symbols that we can see again and again. For example, from El Topo, the amputated
yes.
amputees.
Yes.
And again in Santa Sangre,
yes.
I don't recall it from Holy Mountain.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
But amputees again and again and again, and then again very prominently in the last work. Can you?
There's the small guy. The little woman.
No, the guy with no hands on the stage.
In Dance of Reality, he's there on the stage. Ah, yeah, that's very fun. It's very beautiful because.
So could you reflect on this specific symbol of amputee?
A cinematographer is an eye, is someone who watches and shows. I bought recently a very nice collection that a marketing guy at Warner Brothers had the clever idea to call the pre-code films of the 1930s, before the Hays Code. You know what happened in the 30s in the United States? There were movies, and then suddenly Hays, this guy, like the moral legion, made the Hays Code, which said that men and women could not kiss for more than 3 seconds on screen, and what we could show, what we could not show. But on the I'm going to answer your question. The pre-code period, era, it's great because you see movies where the bad guy is not punished, where a woman, to climb the scale, she's in the beginning she's trying to be prostituted by his father, and she runs away from home, but she understands that men, you can manipulate them with your vagina, and she uses these guys one after the other to climb on top of the ladder, and she becomes a super rich woman, and it's okay, And it has movies who would talk about the Great Depression, unemployment, how the capitalist system of the USA was crushing populations and all that. After the Hays Code, that's over, and starts the American dream. And most Americans see the movie industry in the USA, at least until the 60s, when they started stopping with that and movies became again a bit freer, the late 60s. It's a publicity to make believe to the stories, the audience, that they are like this. Movies stopped being a look at reality, but it was a way to model reality, to give a model of relationship and exist. The housewife, the house with the kitchen, the car, and how to behave. And you still see sometimes American people that learn how to behave and how to relate to one another through what they see in the movies. So there's just two aspects of cinema, right? In a way, my father is proposing a vision of what you can do with your mind, with your heart, with your myth, or whatever, in every movie. You can open yourself to this and that. But concerning that, I was, the first time I returned to Mexico, because we left Mexico and I was in France in 1979, and I came back 20 years later for the first time. I just went around, and Mexico is full of guys like that in the street. It has always been like that. There's a lot of people that are different, well, as we say, to be, you know, with no arms, no hands, small, super tall, obese, and all that. But it's simply, it wasn't shown. People who would shoot movies, when Buñuel made Los Olvidados, with kids in the street, homeless kids, that are quite still cute, it was, oh, Los Olvidados, no. But the guy he just shot, he went to Mexico and he saw that city was full of abandoned kids, and he showed them. So my father was just saying, why should I show a world where these people are there and just put them aside? This is also our world. Our world is full of crippled people. And they're human beings as us, like in El Topo, the one who has no legs and the one who has no arms. They're the assistants of one of the masters. One you can see he can paint with his mouth, and he can comb his colleague with his foot, the other one. So he doesn't show them as monsters. Like, because they relate when they say, this, since we always need to have reference points to understand something, we always have to compare it, no? So his movies are compared with Fellini or Todd Browning, Todd Browning. No, but in Todd Browning, in Freaks, the title of the movie, Freaks. In my father's movie, they're never freaks. They're complete human beings with parts of their body missing. In Anita, in the Endless Poetry, she's a woman completely in love with her man, and her drama is that she's in love. And once she thinks that he goes with someone else, then she starts, it's because I'm small, and she wants a tall woman, or whatever. But at the end, he's with her, and she's pregnant, she has a baby. And then a guy comes in the bar, and he's small like her, and says, you're small, I'm small. And so I would say there's, for everyone, there is a relationship possible there. They're always seen with affection. He likes them very much. What is that? That comes from the guy in the dance, the guy who makes the speech with his hands. He's also in Dance of Reality. And in Dance of Reality, he's a guy who comes from the mines, because that's the origin of why he knows, he sees this. When he was in Tocopilla, it's a region would have copper mines in all the north of Chile, and all these strange rare metals we use in our phones and all this. And the miners would go there, they were using dynamite, and when they had accidents, they would lose. And there were just, by the companies, no money to help them or whatever. So there was a lot of guys in the street, homeless and poor, and with an arm missing, with legs missing, in his street. They were there. It's part of his life. No? He was born in Africa. His movies, there will be black people. There are one maybe in Dance of Reality, I think, or so, because it wasn't in Tocopilla. But the guys without arms, they were there. And in Mexico City, when he went to shoot there, he saw all these people that were there. But the cinema was just making this. You know? But why we don't like to see that? Why we don't like to show that? Because if movies are a symbolic language, it also expresses like we're all cripples, symbolically. We all have in our heart a missing arm. We all have in our mind a missing eye. We get so blind sometimes. Sometimes life repeats us again and again something, and we just don't want to hear it. And we start the same cycle again and again. So it's also saying, it's not that we are the same. We have the right to be in the same screen without an arm, right? A guy without an arm. That comes gently in the first movie. he just needs to scratch. The guy has no, he can't scratch. So he goes against the wall of the shop, and he's like Baloo, right, in the Jungle Book. He scratches himself. And then Alejandro, there is a child, he sees him, he says, he has an ice cream in his hand, and he said, oh, you cannot scratch it. Do you want me to scratch you? Oh, yes. These people that everybody despises them because they're different, and no one touches them. So yes, can you hold my ice cream? Which is half arms, he holds the ice cream, you know? And he says then, he starts scratching his back. Oh, thank you so much, right? You can eat my ice cream. And then he eats the ice cream like this. And then Jaime, the father, who is the society view, comes out, hey, you Obama, get out of here, degenerate, touching my child. And he beats the shit out of him, he throws him away. It's a violent reaction of people who consider that they are normal and the other ones are not. But it's the reaction of an emotionally crippled man that probably sees that. And the man who is crippled is a very gentle guy. He's always shown like this. So, okay, I answer your question, more or less?
Thank you.
That's a very strange gesture.
Yeah, I'm very curious about one of the characters in Endless Poetry.
Yeah.
The American witch, the one that reads the tarot.
In Endless Poetry.
Yes. Could you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, it's...
is she fictional, for an example?
Is she?
Is she fictional? Is she made up?
No. This character existed, and she's the first woman who made the cards, but obviously it wasn't like that. It wasn't a naked guy, and it wasn't the Tarot of Marseille, but it was all these friends of my father where he was going around. They had no money. They didn't have this huge mansion. They were in this house, but it's like an abandoned house, not a luxury place. I tell you, in this movie, he tried to make all that period beautiful, right? So it's a remake. It's a complete fiction. It's trying to have a poetic vision of those days. You see? It's as much a lie as thinking that all that period was horrible, right? But it's a more beautiful lie. There's this master of, Buddhism. He's crying like this, terribly desperate suffering. And his best disciple comes and says, Master, why are you crying? And the master said, my son, he died. He found him out. My son, he died. Said, but Master, you've been teaching us that everything is Maya, everything is illusion. Your son also was an illusion. And the master answers, yes, but it was such a beautiful illusion. You see, so he tries to make a beautiful illusion in this remake. But that woman, there were guys who, they were starving, and this woman would make, every day would have this soup boiling with some sort of broth, and they would go there. And she was kind of a crazy woman, like, I'm making the tarot, I'm going to read you the tarot, right? But it wasn't exactly like that. But everything in the movie is based on things that really happened. And I know for that because my father would, when I was a kid, before he ever even thought about making a written autobiography in a book, it's little stories he would tell us when we were kids. And that probably was like years later he went back to the tarot. And maybe this, like life plants its seeds. And sometimes they take 20, 30, 40 years to grow. And when he went back to the tarot, when after the June project collapsed, there was another project that collapsed, and we were blocked in Paris with no work, and we went to live in a very poor suburb of Paris. He was miserable, and then he started interesting himself in the tarot again, and this part of his life started. But I just realized this right now. He found himself in the same conditions as before. Rejected by the great father, America, of industry. I don't want you, because they said the movie was great, but I just don't want you. Not loved, not appreciated, not recognized, right, by the world in which he wanted to belong, be part of, and poor. So then he goes back to tarot. No? Se non è vero, è ben trovato. If it's not true, it's a nice way to see it. Yes. What else? It's very fun. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. It's such a pleasure to have this conversation.
I will go out of everything. I've read that.
This is micro is off. Is it off?
I don't know. Huh?
All
Okay,
right.
no.
This is typical. Give me Yes, I want to ask you a question.
Okay. I know that your father, when he was young, he had life-changing experience with the LSD, and I would like to ask you if he has more such experience with psychedelics, and if how does it affect his art of creation?
Okay, he wasn't so young, in fact. He was 35 or something like that. And not like many people were doing this experience with LSD in those days, but he didn't do it like most of the guys would used to do it. He did it with an instructor, with someone who, he had some sort of master, some sort of initiation. It was really an experience, really guided, that was not only taking LSD. It was some sort of oral spiritual quest and trying to open his boundaries. So someone talked about this to him, and my father hates medicine, so he really is like paranoid with that. So he really informed himself first, can I stay up there? And it was very sure, it was well, as much as he says, a product that came from a very specific source. It's like people who, I know a rock and roll critic, very famous in France, that one day said to my father, we went to Amsterdam with my girlfriend, we took mushrooms. Wow, it was so great, you know, the toothbrushes were dancing, it's so cool. Some other people, they go to Mexico, they find the witch old master, and they have an initiation moment, and they have an experience that's completely guided, and it's useful for them. My father was trying to break his mental boundaries, and it was one of the things, but he did it once. Yes. My father has always been against drugs. He practically in his life never drank alcohol. My father gave him a beer, he gets out of control, so, you know, and sometimes he can get enthusiastic if we're celebrating. He drinks some sake, you know, but it's little cups, and 2 little cups of sake, taking home. It's going to break everything in the restaurant. He never has smoked in his life because he believes, like the Greeks, mind and body, health of body, health of mind. And probably because he's so afraid of death. He was. I was talking yesterday with someone here, and as how terrified he has always been by death and his disappearance, because what his father told him like this. And in that, when he told, you see in Dance of Reality, it was concomitant with the death of one of the firemen who was burned. He died in a fire, and my grandfather took my father to watch the corpse burned there and told him, you see, there's nothing after. So he got this. So for a long time, it was some sort of fuel for his creativity. I have to create so that something stays, so that it's his way of trying to bite the tree of eternal life, leaving something. But when he did recently, he's been speaking about death with a very complete, there's an article that came out recently here, a very good interview, and he speaks about that with very much distance and saying, I'm okay, I'm ready, I hope I have the time to finish the things I still want to do. But and I think that's an effect, a post effect of the making of endless poetry. Because he's get rid of resentment, and as you see at the end of the movie, the character goes away with the symbol of death, like skeleton with wings. That is the same image you have at the end of Dance of Reality, but without the wings. And this is not the symbol of death, this is the symbol of transformation. In the tarot cards, there's one card that has no name, that we are used to call death, but it has no name. And you don't see some kind of skeleton, like with this thing, you know, to cut the herbs. And there's the heads of kings and queens. But it's symbolically, death is a transformation.
This also shows beautifully with this dance of skeletons
and the devils,
and the
right?
devils, and this angel came like.
And the angel. Yeah. But that's it's a symbol. Transformation and anima, and the pulsion, the call for creativity, and all that makes him fly. Yeah, that's symbolic, but it's visual symbolism. So no, he wasn't into drugs, and you see, he was analyzing The Wizard of Oz. It's a movie he likes very much, and there's this moment when they're practically approaching to the castle, Dorothy and her 3 friends plus the dog, and the witch of the east is the bad one. Must be.
Wicked Witch of the West.
The wicked, the green one, huh? It's the west. No, they cross this field, and she makes them sleep, because so they fall asleep. And how does the good witch resolve that? She makes snow fall on them. Snow. So it was some sort of message that youngs, you know, can solve your problems and achieve and get to the castle with snow, with drugs. It could be read like this. But he doesn't believe, and I don't either, that it's through drugs that you find yourself. Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is for, I would love to hear from maybe both of you. We've talked about the father figure, either through metaphorically or figuratively, the father figure, and yeah, like the father figure or the grandfather figure in some cases. And I would like to explore the subject in your own terms about spirituality, of the role of spirituality in either in terms through the holy mountain or through the father figure in the dance of reality.
You saw dance of reality? Okay. Do you understand his question?
It's free. You can either you answer it or
do you understand?
Share your thoughts
I'm not
about
sure,
well, I'm not sure either.
The subject of spirituality.
It's a very vague.
Yeah, it is. But
your question is very vague. I'm not sure. It's a too big question for my brain. Could you be more precise? So we have a starting point. Try to make a precise question so that we can try.
It's more like because there's a lot about talking about religion and either changing the meaning of it or rejecting it.
Not religion, the myth.
The myth. And for a lot of cases, like God is like some sort of father figure in many cases.
Yes.
And also it could be a literal meaning or a literal term. And I just wanted to look at it. I just want to talk about the role of spirituality in the terms in creation. It's very vague. I'm sorry, but we can go for the next question if.
No, I can actually talk about my little experience, because when I saw El Topo for the first time, I actually thought that I finally found someone who's got a similar mystical view as I had, and I basically being immersed in Western esoteric traditions, I saw a lot of what he was connected with, and the symbolism he was putting into his pictures, the Kabbalistic symbols, the alchemical symbols, and things like that. And of course, that became even more clear when I saw Magic Mountain. And also because I know the root of some of his interests and learning and teachings. I mean, you were talking about his LSD trip with Oscar Icazo, who was...
Oscar Icazo was his guide, yes.
He was with the Areca School in South America, which is based on Gurdjieff and the Fourth Way. And also because your father has always said that, I mean, you're maybe not born with a soul, but you have to make one. So, and you basically make up your destiny as you go along, which of course I think is a message of in the dance of reality. So I think, I mean, he has influenced me sometimes I'm probably projecting all the wrong images or all the wrong expectations, but he has this beautiful palette of imagery and myths. I see myself in those things, and I feel deep spirituality, which I identify with in his pictures.
What do you do? You're an artist?
I'm a dancer.
You're a dancer? Okay. Remember I said this story about the teacher of philosophy. After the whole class, the only thing they remember was the action he did with them. Right? So I would like to do something with you that I have never, ever, ever done in my life, which is something that maybe my father would do. Okay? Do you allow me to do a symbolic thing with you? Because you asked this question. Okay? Let me take that risk. Do you agree? Come. Would you agree to do it with me?
Of course. I can never say no.
It's okay. It's okay. So, put your hand, your left hand in my heart. Here. But give me your love. Give me your love. Okay. This looks weird.
I think that answered my question.
All is full of love. I feel it. I feel it now.
Okay. What time is it? It's 7. Thank you very much.
Yes, we We'll be signing people up for our love cult just outside, so if you just leave your names and your credit card information.
Huh? What?
I said we're just signing up people for the love cult that we have just formed.
So, yes. Don't denigrate the thing. Don't make jokes. That's just what happens on the stage of the movies. Then an actor makes a joke to make it lighter. Don't make jokes.